Thank you to everybody who's come today. It's always good to see the people who've been attending these over the last few months as everything's been changing, and now I'm sure you're all following the new negotiations. We're not sure exactly what's coming down the pike this week and next with the Democrats and Republicans in Congress in Washington. They're all debating the next stimulus package. Don't know if there's going to be another change to the payroll tax laws or not. So we'll be waiting for that. And certainly if there is, we're going to try to jump on it and let you all know how that affects us Vista users. All right, 4 after the hour. So welcome here. Today we're going to be going over the 941 with the COVID leave. This is the 941 for second quarter. With me today, I have Jenna Bonham, who's at Silvertrek Systems. She'll be helping to answer questions and go through them and ask some questions at the end. We're going to try to leave as much time as possible at the end for questions and answers. This webinar is recorded. Just to remember, a note to remember that what I'm doing today is I'm trying to get you information of how to pull out information from Vista, and I am not your CPA nor your lawyer. Make sure you have fully check with everybody before you file your 941. I don't want to get anybody in trouble on accident. With me as well today is Gary Gilmore and Randy from Viewpoint, who will also be helping to answer questions. They'll be taking some of the questions in the back as they can, and any questions that you have that we don't get to, we'll try to get to after the webinar. We have 1 hour today, a little less than an hour today to go through this, and there's a lot of details and a lot of nuances for you, especially who have a complicated payroll setup and have had employees take COVID leave. I guess there's two main groups of people who I see are attendees on this. First of all, there's several people who are here, many people I guess I can say, that have purchased the premium setup. So I'll be looking at the premium setup in some way, in some regards. However, most of the people on this webinar are people who have the standard setup, and we'll be looking at how to fill out the 941 with the standard setup as the main focus today. A little background. So we filled out our own 941. We of course have the premium setup. We try to eat our own dog food. We had people who took the caretaker and the family leave. We had some people on the COVID, and we wanted to make sure that we could have everything tie out. It did tie out nicely. We were able to get through our own 941. And what we're going to show today is our test system. So we've kind of made a mock of similar to what we have going on in the second quarter in our test system, and we're just going to pull that up and kind of go through how that works and answer as many questions as we can. My main goal today is to look at the 941s themselves. Of course, as you guys can see on my screen right here, what I have is the actual forms that I've gotten from the website. I pulled them fresh this morning just in case. I have the 941 page 1, 941 page 2 here, and then I have from the instructions worksheet 1, which we'll be going through in detail in order to answer some of the questions on this. I have blanked out some of these lines, not because they're not important, but just because they're not relevant to our discussion today. The top portion there, and then several of the parts that deal with the non-refundable portions of the credits, et cetera, that don't have anything to do with what we have. And hopefully my blanking out actually held and didn't screw up as I resized things. But if it did, we'll adjust as we go. Of course, all of you guys who are using Vista are also using Atrix. And we have, the Atrix can pre-fill a lot of this information for us. And what I found is that Atrix is updating things, and they'll probably continue to update things. They've been a great partner for Viewpoint, I know, and so there's going to be additional work coming out as time goes on. Although we're getting close to the end of July, this is due July 31st, so we're going into this with the assumption that the Atrix is running the way it's going to run through the end of this quarter. I did update Atrix this morning, and just to ensure that I have everything ready to go. All right, so my plan today is basically to fill out this 941 with you guys, and I'm going to do this the old-fashioned way manually, as best I can. What you see on the screen here is the 941 for 2020. I'm going to just jump straight in and start filling this out as if I was doing this for our test system here. All right, so this is the company here. We're going to come in and we're going to say we're doing the second quarter. The number of employees in our test system was 17 employees. And then we say, okay, we got to get our wages, tips, and other compensation. This is something that is pulled for us in Atrix. Now, so if I pull up Vista here, all right, and I go to Atrix as it's been pulled, you can see here that there's in our test system this 17 employees and this wages, tips, and other compensation, this 260 number plus the federal income tax that we have queued up. And if we go to our employee accumulations, which is the one I always use to tie these things out, and I run this report simply by putting in the quarter end here. I don't print employee details, I don't print group details, I print the company totals, and I definitely include inactive. For those of you guys who have run this a long time, I've confused myself in quarters past by not checking that at first and wondering why it doesn't line up with Atrix. So here we have our totals for the company, for this our test Silvertrek company, and we have the federal withholding as our deductions. You can see our subject and eligible are the same amount, 260, 222, and we go back to Atrix 260, 222. So we have the same number there. So if I was going to be doing this the old-fashioned way, I could just fill that out. 260, 222. Federal income tax, I'm going to skip pennies for the sake of brevity here. When you look here, we can also grab the federal income tax withheld right off of Atrix 23. I can go and double check this by going into my deductions, 23,954 there. So we can make sure that those are the same numbers. In the case when you have a situation where Atrix and your federal income tax do not, your Atrix federal income tax and your accumulations don't match, which would be surprising to say the least, I definitely recommend getting in touch with Viewpoint Support and finding out what's going on there. Almost every time I've done that though, it's not been the system's problem. It's been the fact that I haven't run this report with the correct parameters. So it's always user error with me, but these numbers should match. Federal withholding, eligible, I'm looking at the quarter to date amount here and the amount. So 23,954 is what I need to fill in there. 23,954. Then we get into the taxable Social Security wages, and this is where things start to go off the rails. So 5A, taxable Social Security wages, column 1. Normally, in the olden days, only 3 months ago, with this, there was just taxable Social Security, taxable Medicare, and then we had the tips and additional Medicare tax. We didn't have this 5A and 1 and 5A2 here. The key here, and this is where we start to deviate away from Atrix, the key is that this taxable Social Security wages is the total taxable amount that we're going to pay, and then we're going to add on we're going to add these three together. So we're going to have the taxable Social Security, this is normal Social Security, we're going to have the employee portion and the employee portion of the sick leave and the family leave wages. And so we're going to add these together. What that means though, that when we're filling out our column 1 taxable Social Security wages here, we have to not include the wages for which we get a credit. And that gets a little bit funny because when you look at the way Atrix pulls it, just like it always has, you can see here we have 257,799. And when I look at my PR employee accumulations, you can see here that's my FICA Social Security employee, this is the deduction side. We have the subject and the eligible 257,799. Normally that would be fine. However, when we do the math here, this is actually more than we really owed, because if you'll recall, under the FFCRA law, the wages that we're paying to the employees for COVID, the 3 COVID earnings codes are not subject to employer tax. That's why it's 0.062 here instead of 0.124 like it normally is. Therefore, this number is incorrect if you have COVID wages, and that if you're set up correctly, if you have the COVID, if you follow the standard procedure, this is instead going to be your liability FICA Social Security subject amount, $251,933. So you can see here we have a subject amount and we have an eligible amount, and this eligible amount was reduced because of the COVID earnings, and it was reduced if you have this set up in with your basis codes correctly. It should have reduced correctly all quarter long. So instead of that full amount here, we're going to have this $251,933. $251,933. Then we're going to do the math, and we're going to say that $251,933 times 0.124, 31,239 should be the amount that we're paying. Now, this 31,239 is the amount that we're going to enter in here. And you're going, well, wait a minute, is that really what I paid? And we'll get to that. Everything should tie out in the end. So we have here 31,239, 31,239 here. So that's our taxable Social Security wages. Now we have to get our qualified sick leave wages in here. And these are the wages that are subject only half the Social Security tax. And we need to enter in those amounts. Atrix by default, and I haven't found a way, although I don't pretend to know everything about Atrix, but I haven't found a way to get these to default for me, but they put in zeros here. Greg, if you know a way of putting these in, definitely let me know, but I don't know of any way to actually put these in. Now, the qualified sick leave wages and the qualified family leave wages, these are just 2 codes. And as you'll remember, we actually set up 3 codes. So we have in our case, in our test systems case anyway, we have 102 and 103, which are caretaker and family leave. But there's also a 101, which was the COVID credit, which was not reduced by 2/3. So 101, 102, and 103. If for sake of simplicity here, I only have brought up these 2, or brought in these 2. Caretaker is the sick leave portion, and the 103 is the other. If you have all 3 codes being used, the qualified sick leave wages are the sum of earnings 101 and 102, and the family leave wages is simply 103. So in our test case here, we have these dollar amounts up here. You can see here's my totals for the quarter, 2580, 2580, and qualified family leave wages, 3286. 3286. Now we can just do the math, and this allows us to say, just take the dollar amounts of those 2580 times 0.062, 159.96, I'll say 160 here, and 3286 times 0.062, 203.73, and I'll just say 204. So taxable Social Security tips, taxable medical, Medicare wages, etc. But before we get on with this, let's just do a quick double check and see if what we have actually matches up to what the system has calculated. because it should, right? If we have everything set up correctly, all of these numbers should add up to what we have truly paid. So this is all Social Security. This was the Social Security that we paid for employee and employer on all wages that were not COVID, all of the wages, or all the Social Security that we paid for the qualified sick leave, and all of the wages that we paid for this. So let's go ahead and add up these three and see what we come up with. Let's pull up where my mouse go here. There we go. I'm going to pull this to one side just so that I can do this here. All right. I'd love it if this thing could go away. Hey, it can. Good. All right. Sorry about that. It's funny, after using multiple screens for so long, I hardly even remember how to use just a single screen anymore. So I have 31,239, and that's the first amount. That's the amount that's subject, the amount from the wages that were subject to both. I have the 160, which is the sick leave, and I have the 204, which is the family leave. And I got 31,603. Remember that I'm rounding. 31,603. Now, how does that compare to what I actually withheld? And what I actually withheld and paid in liability is from my PR and employee accumulations, my Social Security. So that would be this amount here, plus, whoops, it was on the bottom of that page, plus in my liabilities section, Social Security, this amount here. So if we're lucky, then this comes out to be the same, 15,619.84 plus 15,983, 31,602. So that's the sum of my liability here, which was reduced because of the eligible amount, and the sum of my deduction here, which was not reduced, 31,602. When we added those together before on the work I'm doing on the 941, I got 31,603. And of course, that's just because the dollar difference is because of my ignoring the pennies. So my three numbers on my 941 here, 31,239, 160, and 204 equal exactly to my federal or PR accumulations for the quarter of 15,619 and 15,983. That was the first big sigh of relief that I had when I was doing our real 941 with our real numbers. That, you know what, these two numbers work and they completely match. But I wasn't out of the woods yet. So I've got those two numbers and I've filled them out. Those three numbers rather, although they're really just two different numbers broken out on here with a qualified sick leave, qualified family leave wages. Now, in the test system here, we don't have any wages, we don't have any tips. I mean, that's what I meant to say, taxable Social Security tips, but we do have taxable Medicare wages and tips. We have, if we go to Atrix, then you can see here 257,799. I can go confirm that. FICA Medicare 257,799. It's actually the same here, whether I'm looking at the deduction, the subject, or the eligible amount. Everything's the same. So all that's good. We can use Atrix as is. We don't have to overwrite that in any way. So 257,799 is what I'm going to put in here. 257,799. I can multiply that, do the math here myself. 257,799 times 0.029 here, and we get 7476. 7476. We add all of that up, and we're going to have, let's see here, 7476 plus 31,239, 31,603, I'm sorry. So I can do the math manually here, 31,239, 239 if I can type, plus 160 plus 204 plus 7476. And we get 39,079, which is going to be my total amount that I return down here. Unless 39,079, 39,079. So that's my total in this little scenario here. So I don't have any tax due on reported tips, so I just add those two together from above, 23,954 from my federal, and that 39 plus 23,954, 63,033. 033. So far, so good. We've been able to do this. Adjustments for fractions of cents. Of course, I would have this here if I was really rounding to the nearest penny, which I'm not going to do when I sign and send in our real one. And then we have adjustments for sick pay, adjustments for tips, and group life insurance. The first thing that I did when I saw this sick pay was panic, which is not appropriate according to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But I did go and read through the instructions and realize that this is just the standard sick pay, and we're not talking about anything to do with the FFCRA sick pay in this particular box. So I was able to skip over that. And tips, group life insurance, those of course will pertain to some of you, but we're just going to pass through those today. So total taxes after adjustments, which is just the sum of these lines, is 63,033 in our case. Qualified small business payroll tax credit for increasing research activities, none for us. In this scenario, we don't care. The non-refundable portion of credit for qualified sick and family leave wages for worksheet one, from worksheet one, and this is where things start to get interesting. So there is the first time that we see this word non-refundable. We see the word non-refundable here for qualified sick and family leave wages from worksheet one, and then oh, look at that. All of these things did manage to move around on me. I'll just delete them and we can burn through them here. We have down below, we see on 13C, the refundable portion of the credit for the qualified sick and family leave wages from worksheet one. So they've split this up into what they call the non-refundable portion and the refundable portion. And when we look here in Atrix, we can see that it's asking us to fill this in and asking us to fill this in here as well from worksheet one. And then it gives us, as you click through, it actually gives you the ability to fill out worksheet one yourself, and with some things pre-filled, and that's good. The new Atrix has that worksheet one there. Worksheet one is available to anybody who wants to just take a look at it in the instructions for the 941. It's not something that you actually turn in. It just says on the top of it, and I've copied and pasted it here for our use. It just says, hey, here's your credit for the qualified sick and family leave wages and employee retention credit. Keep for your record. So this is not part of the official 941, but we do need to fill this out and send it in. Fill this out in order to fill out the boxes 11 and 13 on the other side, but we don't need to send it in. So the majority of this step one is related to the other non-refundable credits, things that predated the FFCRA. And there's various different aspects to this, none of which pertain to us today. What's important though about step one is that some of the things on step one are used in step two, or particularly the employer share of Social Security tax remaining is used in order to separate out the amount that is refundable and non-refundable portion of the credits that you're about to take on this Form 941. So basically it's asking us here on the worksheet one, again, this is in the instructions, to fill out the amount of Social Security tax from line 5A, column 2, and line 5B, column 2. So we've already filled those out here. If we go look over here, you see we have 5A and 5B, right? This total taxable Social Security wages. So we can fill out all of this. We add those together. I'm not going to do all of this math with you guys. We take the amount, multiply it by 50%. We make sure to run all through the notice and demand things, as third-party sick payer, we have any kind of credit from Form 8974, et cetera, at Form 88 sorry, 5884C is also included here. But at the end of the day, all we care about is what is the employer share of Social Security tax remaining. So this number right here is what we end up caring about for the FFCRA and for our COVID credits. The employer share of Social Security tax remaining. And we happen to have that number easily at hand. The employer share of Social Security tax, because we don't have any of the other forms and the third parties and all of that kind of thing. The employer share of Social Security tax is simply this FICA Social Security. This is right off of my employee accumulations for the quarter. And we have this 15,916.84. So I'm going to say 15,620. 15,620. 15,620. So I gloss over all of that because it doesn't pertain to FFCRA, not that it's not important in the 941 in general. Okay, so now we have the employer share of Social Security tax remaining. That's all we need from step one in order to complete step two. Step two is where we actually figure the sick and the family leave credit. All right, first step, 2A, qualified sick leave wages reported on 941, part 1, 5A, I. When they start getting into the I's and the I's and they start dealing with Roman numerals, you know we're in trouble. So this step 2A here comes directly from column 1, 5A, I, 2580. 5A, I, column 1, 2580. Okay, so we come back over here and we say 2580. All right, that's our qualified sick leave wages. And now remember, in our case, we only had one, the 102 code, but this could be the sum of your 101 code and your 102 code. In our case, is 101 and 102. It's the COVID caretaker and the COVID sick leave one. That's the standard two. Qualified sick leave wages included on 941 Part 1 5C, but not included on 941 Part 1 5A. I, column 1, because the wages reported on that line were limited by Social Security wage base. Okay, so this didn't happen earlier. This 2580 didn't happen earlier, but you might be wondering, wait, not included, not reported on that line because it was limited by the Social Security wage base. When would this happen? Now, this could happen to you if you had someone who took COVID pay after they hit the taxable limit. What is it, 137,500 this year? So if somebody had already made, say, $150,000 in the year, and then they took sick leave wages, then you would have to include something on this line. Again, for sake of brevity, we only have an hour here. I did not go into this scenario, but there is times where people take COVID leave. They're eligible for COVID leave, even though they're compensated that highly. In our case, 0. We didn't have any. So then we have our total qualified sick leave wages, which is just the sum of these two, 2580. And then we get the qualified health plan expense allocatable to qualified sick leave wages. Allocatable to qualified sick leave wages. You'll remember from the FFCRA, the FFCRA allows us to say how much of your health insurance was related to the wages spent, the time spent out on sick leave, if you're still covering them, making sure that they're covered for medical. And what we had put together for everybody to calculate this was this spreadsheet. This is still available on our website if you need it. Basically, for somebody, you're able to say whether they had employee, caretaker, family leave. We're talking mostly caretaker here, their dollar amount, and it would calculate out their medical reimbursement portion. So the medical liability and how much is allocatable. So if they had 20 hours of caretaker leave and nothing else, well, then the 200 hours would work. The whole $200 would be allocatable to this. However, if they had something like 20 hours of regular time and 20 hours of caretaker time, you can see this just got cut in half, and the $200 of medical liability would be cut in half, and it was proportionate to the hours. So you're able to allocate that medical liability to this. So we have the responsibility and the opportunity both to say to say of the employer portion of any medical that you're paying, you can get reimbursed as long as you can somehow track that back, for an audit or whatever, to say this is how we came up with that. And most of you, I would say, it's the majority of people who are doing medical liability are doing it by the hour. That's maybe a slim majority. You also have people, some of you guys out there who are doing it as a flat rate, first payroll of the period, that kind of thing. In which case it becomes a little harder to allocate that medical liability to specific hours. But there is ways to do that, and you can do that with this spreadsheet if you choose. But we need to be able to say how much of our medical reimbursement is applicable here. For those of you who have the premium package, it's fairly easy. You can just run the amount to say how much of this how much of the medical deductions were, or how much of, I'm sorry, I'm getting it mixed up here, but my words mixed up as I'm trying to navigate at the same time. You can just say how much was shown on the COVID reports. So this is the COVID reimbursement detail report, and you can just pull that number directly off of there. For those of you who have the standard set up, some of you maybe already have that allocated out in a different way, or you're using a separate spreadsheet, but you'll need to find the dollar amount of that put in at that time. Okay, so let me pull that number here. Oops. 12630. So you can see here the report total for the Medicare 518.80. So that's how much I need to put in here. So the qualified health plan expenses in this test system, 518.80. So $518. Now we just say the employer share of Medicare tax and qualified sick leave wages. So we multiply that line 2A2, so this one here, by our 0.014%. So I'll pull this over a little bit. 2580 times 0.0145, and we get 37.41. $37. One note on this 2C, this employer share of Medicare tax on qualified sick leave wages. It was brought to attention fairly early on that there might be an issue with medical deductions, and if you have a medical deduction, that it can come out of your qualified sick leave wages. So let me expand on that slightly. Let's just say I'm going to go over here on the side of my whiteboard here and give an example. This doesn't come up in our test, but it's worth calling out in case you guys have this. Let's just say that you have an employee that is paid $1,000 per week, and there is an employee medical deduction of $100. So for their dependents, say they pay $100, so they actually net $900. And then there's also an employer portion of this that say is $200. So the employer is paying on behalf of this employee $200 for this week. And if that whole week was out on COVID, the $900 here is the only thing that is subject to Medicare, not the 1,000. And so you guys who have the premium package saw this change come out sometime after, as more things were getting clarified. But it would be this $900 that would be put in this area, not the 1,000. And that's important because it's this $900 which we're multiplying by 0.0145, and it's not the 1,000. When I pulled this earlier, this 2580, and of course this 2580 simply came from this here, 5AI, which is a 2580 qualified sick leave wages, and this came from my accumulations report here, tying it all back to the accumulations report, 2580 here. This 2580 was the full amount of the caretaker, not the amount that is allocated or the amount of the employee's medical deduction. Now, the employees, in our case, we don't have employee medical deduction in the test system here. We set it up as if they have, and this is actually true. It's Overcheck 100% of all of their benefits are covered by the employer. So there wasn't this complication, I can say, in the test system. But this can definitely come up, and it can cause your numbers to be off by some amount. And special thanks to Tim Summers for helping me work through this last week. And you know, it's an interesting situation. Basically, what we have to do in order to make that happen is all the way back here on 5A II, qualified family and sick leave wages. We have to reduce this amount here for the allocatable medical deduction there. And I'm sure there's going to be more questions on that. That's a fairly confusing topic. Okay, so in our case, we didn't have that complication. It's lovely having a test system where you can just get rid of real life complications in order to get done with a 941 in an hour. But now we can pull our line 2D, which is just simply adding up those three here. All right. So 2580 plus 518 plus 37, 3135, 3135, and that's our credit for qualified sick leave wages. Now we do the same thing for our family leave wages, which is basically the same process. So first we go back to 941 5A II back here. All right. We have 941 5A II 3286 here. So go back to my worksheet 3286. Qualified family leave wages not included because they were limited by Social Security wage base. Again, people who were paid over the Social Security limit already in the first part of the year. It'll definitely happen as you guys encounter this COVID leave towards the end of the year. More people are going to be hitting that limiter. We have zero in our case in this scenario. Total qualified leave wages 3286. Write that 3286. Qualified health plan expenses allocatable to qualified family leave wages, and then we have that portion there, and I just have this as a note. So 620. Oops, sorry, 621. All right. Employer share of Medicare tax on qualified family leave wages. So we multiply that. We have the same scenario here. If we had a medical deduction, then we'd have the same thing that we talked about earlier, same complication. We don't. 3286 times 0.0145, 4764, 4764. Okay. And now on this, we add it all up. We get to 2H. 3286 plus 621 plus 4764, 3946, 3946. All right. Credit for qualified sick and family leave wages, simply those two added together. Okay. 3135 plus 3946, 7081. 7081. Couple of notes for those of you who have purchased the premium. These numbers right here, the easiest way to find them, like I pulled up on the report here, this bottom of that report, so that you can pull these two numbers easily. That's the amount that you already allocated and you already probably took the credit for. All right. So now we say the non-refundable portion, 2J here is where we get into the refundable, non-refundable. Non-refundable portion of credit for qualified sick and family leave wages. Again, we're back on worksheet 1 here in the instructions. 2J, so we enter the smaller of line 1L here, or line 2I. In our case, the smaller is this 7081. So this one's smaller than that one. Now 2K is the refundable portion of credit. Subtract 2J here from 2I. That's 0 in our case. So you can see here, if our qualified sick and family leave wages plus Medicare plus medical liability, then we would have anything that is over the amount of the employer Social Security tax. So the employer Social Security tax, anything that's over that, we would have an amount entered in to our qualified sick and family leave wages. So pretend for a moment here that that after we did all of this work here, that 2I was something like $20,000, right? Now our credit for the qualified sick leave would be 4,380, and the remaining 15,620, I hope I did that math right, would be our refundable portion. So we'd have the non-refundable and the refundable portion in that scenario. In this little test that I did, we don't have any non-refundable portion. We only have a non-refundable portion. Okay, we've completed worksheet 1 successfully. It's only taken us 45 minutes and we're ready to go back to here. No payroll tax credit, and we say 11B, non-refundable portion of credit for the qualified sick leave wages. This non-refundable portion, we already calculated. We got it exactly here for us. It is, whoa, it likes to bounce around on me. Sorry about that if I'm making any of you guys motion sick. 7081, it's this portion right here. 2J, non-refundable portion. 7081. Employee retention credit, this not the topic for today, a whole nother topic. I'm sure all you guys are eager for that one. Total non-refundable credits, in this case it's just math, 7081. Total taxes after adjustments and non-refundable credits. So all we have to do is add those up, or subtract them rather, 63,033 minus 7081, and we get 55,952. 55,952. 952. And then we go and look at our deposits for the quarter. And our deposits for the quarter is the standard situation, usually, with the exception that now our deposits have been reduced, because our deposits have been reduced by all of the amounts that we've been able to take as the credits. So in our case, because it's all the non-refundable, all of our wages were non-refundable, we can, in our test system, our total deposits for the quarter, and I'm cutting to the chase here, actually equal exactly the same thing, 55,952. When I did Silvertrek's real 941, it was 3 pennies different than the total taxes that were owed, which was great. So then we have deferred amount of the employer share of Social Security tax. This is referred to, this is, anything that you have deferred for the FFCRA, what we can defer, and all of that. In our case, we chose not to defer anything because of to not complicate our credits. If you have, that might come up and you'll have to defer that, but that's the simple math. And then we put in the refundable portion of the credit for qualified sick and family leave wages. In our case, this is from worksheet 1 as well. In our case, this is 0. If we had done the $20,000 and we had more than that, we would have more than 0. We would have that $15,000 figure there as a refundable portion. And we can continue on. We didn't have retention credit, so we have the total deposits, etc., deferrals and refundable credits. So the 55 we would add to our refundable portion if we had it. We don't. 55,952. And then total advances from filling form 7,200. 7,200, if you guys will recall, was the amount that said, hey, I can't take a full credit. I've had more people in COVID than we owe in federal taxes for a particular pay week, so I'm going to send this in and I'm going to get paid back within 2 weeks. I hope some of you guys were able to take advantage of that if you were hard hit by COVID and needed to have a lot of people out on the COVID leave. In this case, we didn't have to fill out any of those in our test system, so we have 0 here. And then we have our total deposits, deferrals, and refundable credits less advances. Subtract 13F from 13E. In this case, it's just the same amount, 55, 952, 952. And then we have the balance due if there's any. So if line 12 is greater than line with this, right? So we have 0. Now, when could this be a balance due? And of course, the balance could be due if you didn't pay correctly or if you missed payment or whatever, one of those weird scenarios. But if your deposits for the quarter were less because of a refundable credit, then this, so the refundable portion that you already took, this amount will add up to that amount in line 12, and there shouldn't be any overpayment or underpayment if you followed the standard viewpoint setup. Okay, so the Schedule B is the last portion, and the Schedule B is a pretty easy form usually to fill out, especially because Atrix does a lot of the work for us. However, in our case here, it says very clearly that the Schedule B, the liability needs to add up to this amount here. And the complication there is that if you have a refundable portion of the employee credit, of the qualified sick and family leave credit. So if this is filled out here, then it's not quite as simple as just reading off the report. You actually have to split out the liability that you owed at each time, and then subtract out this amount here from each week's liability. So that can be kind of complicating. Also, if you use this full liability, so if you just say, well, I'm gonna report on my Schedule B everything that I owed before any credits at all, that number will be higher than the 55. In our case, in this little test, the Schedule B would add up to 63,033. So you have to be a little cautious there when you're filling out your Schedule B. There is instructions on the Schedule B and in the 941 instructions to show that it needs to add up to line 12. If you have only non-refundable credits, it's fairly easy. You just add it up to there. And you can use, those of you who have the premium setup can just use the simple report that shows each pay date and replace the numbers in Atrix to have it all add up to 55,952. All right. So I breezed through that 941. I'm now theoretically ready anyways to go back and sign this. I would have to fill out the rest of this tax liability, etc. And sign this and send it in. Of course, I would want to make sure that I've reconciled my balance sheet accounts and make sure that there is nothing else hiding in my payroll system that's going to come back and bite me. I also want to make sure that I've filled out any spreadsheets that I need to in order to be good in an audit. Things like this, when I've calculated my medical reimbursement, Medicare reimbursement, anything that if I've reduced my caretaker wages because of a medical deduction, for example, you want to make sure you have all of that documented to substantiate it in case of an audit. Okay, well, I'm going to use the last 8 minutes here. I know this was probably drinking from a fire hose, and I'm going to just do my best in the few minutes remaining. Hopefully there has been some questions, and in anything I have talked about, we can already answer. Let's see if anybody has entered. Okay. All right. I believe when you complete worksheet 1 in Atrix, it autofills 5A1 and 5A2. Okay, great. Thank you for that. Ali, that was thanks for that information when I was going through that. Atrix does pre-fill a lot of that worksheet for you. I just recommend, because of the complications of COVID, the COVID leave, that whenever you're working in Atrix, just make sure you understand what it's filling and where it's filling from. With the primary one that you need to very much be aware of is that it's filling from FICA Social Security deduction here, and it needs to be filling from the FICA Social Security eligible amount here. So that's going to be the big one. Will Atrix handle the FFCRA W-2 reporting requirements in box 14? Thanks for that question, Eric. That is an excellent question. We don't know. We don't know yet exactly how that's going to be handled. Certainly, we haven't dug into the W-2 requirements, but there will be some interplay there, and I'm sure that we'll have to update you guys as we learn more about the W-2s. Unless Gary has something different, I don't believe Atrix has come out with any guidance on that yet.
Michael, yeah, can I chime in on that?
Yes, please do.
Sure. They have not yet announced anything. However, in reviewing the way in which we handle the integration with Atrix and pass information from the W-2 into, you can mark it for box 14 display. I have full confidence that it's going to work without any special modification. So we just have to be able to identify the what type it is, and then we'll be prepared to do that, pass it through our normal W-2 processing, and then hand it off to Atrix. So there's
Awesome.
no, as far as I know, there's no change to the form itself. And since it's reported in box 14, there should be no need to change any of the file format or any of the information that we actually send over to Atrix. So we should be good.
Yeah, perfect. Let's see here, Sean. Hi, Sean, good to see you back. On the COVID-19 emergency paid leave requirements reimbursement detail, what is the difference between the expected reimbursement and the current reimbursement? Is that the Medicare tax difference? The answer, Sean, is yes, it is the Medicare tax difference. So there's some pennies difference in some cases. So there was additional guidance given out sometime after we pushed out, and Sean is talking about this premium report here. Let's see if I can pull it up. So on this report here, there's a column at the end that says there's a expected reimbursement and a current reimbursement. Basically it said, hey, how much did you actually take? And maybe in the early days, because in the early days we didn't know how to handle the Medicare, additional guidance came out and we were able to tweak that to get the pennies right. And so Sean, you'll probably see a few pennies difference on those first weeks. And then in the later weeks, you won't see that. That's exactly what it is. Thanks for that question. Can you show us how to tag an earning code for box 14, Eric? Actually, sorry, Eric, I don't actually have time. It's actually quite easy, but that is available. I can show you where online you can do that. So that's pretty easy. We can post that for you. Just to clarify, you will need to reduce 5A and B, 1 and 2 by medical deductions, essentially gross less the 25S, correct? Yeah, so Rhonda, thanks for that question. 5A and B here. Let's go to back to the form. This is up top here, 5A, I, 5A. It's actually not 5A and B, it's actually just 5A1 to 5A2, or I and II. You'll have to reduce by medical deductions that are not taxable for medical, or not taxable for Medicare, I'm sorry. So that's most of your medical deductions are not taxable. So you have to reduce those in order for that to come out. Now, you know, the amount is fairly negligible, generally speaking. So if you have, you know, it can be just a few dollars off, but definitely if you want to be exact here, you want to take that with those wages, reduce them for the medical deduction, put it in there, then multiply 0.062. That can be a little bit complicated when you're trying to get everything to tie out, but that's the way I understand you should do that. After the first webinar, it was suggested in the next one to spread the FICA credit across all 3 taxes when you did deposits. What if you did not do that? Kelly, good question. Yes, that was absolutely the suggestion, and what's interesting is that we can't tell what they're doing with that now, because it's and what she's referring to is when you enter in your EFTPS payment, it asks you to say how much is reduced, or how much is the federal income tax, how much is Social Security, how much is Medicare, and we just said, well, spread it out evenly and take it that way. As far as we can tell, they're not doing anything with that information. Certainly, when we're talking about the refundable versus non-refundable information down here. The only thing that they're looking at is the employer's portion of Social Security. And so they didn't take all three of them into account in quite the same way. But the law is crystal clear that you can reduce your deposit by the full amount that you owe, including the federal wages, even though that's just withheld from the employee's check. Sorry, the federal tax liability, even though that's just withheld from the employee's check. So even if you did that or didn't do that, you'll still be able to fill out your 941 successfully. So in this, there is no place on the 941 that says, here's how much I deposited for this amount, here's how much I deposited for that amount. On the Schedule B, it simply says what your tax liability is, and then we just, and it just has to match up to that box 12 down below. Good question. All right, anything else before we conclude? Gary, anything on your side that you would like to chime in and say before we conclude here, as far as anything upcoming or the announcements?
No, excellent presentation. I think very clear. Very happy everything tied out for you. That's really the moment of truth. Clearly, contact Viewpoint Support if you need some help with this, or Michael at Silvertrek, more than willing to help you through this. We do not anticipate making any additional changes to the integration with Atrix for the 941. Frankly, because it's hopefully going to be fairly short-lived. We got to get you through this year, but 2021, after you report for the fourth quarter of 2020, our expectation is things will revert back to the way they were, or something new is going to come along. So anyway, stay tuned. And again, thank you very much, Michael, for putting this on.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you very much for coming. And just quickly, for anybody who are just now getting hit with COVID, or you guys are just kind of getting into it and you've had COVID leave, there is silvertrek.net. You can still purchase the premium. This is just a shameless plug. I'm getting my salesman on, so you guys can log off now. But you can still come in here and purchase this. You can see the payroll protection program system, and then also the coronavirus. This does work in like you can install this and then fill out your 941. The reports all still work, even if you hadn't had it during the times where you've done the deposit. And we're more than willing to help you walk through that with the complications. Sometimes people find that it's easier to use our reports to calculate the amount that is allocatable, the medical amount specifically, and also to calculate the Medicare portion that was associated with the employee's medical. So if that would be helpful, it's here on our website. You can get in touch with either me or Jenna or anybody here at Silvertrek, and we can help you out. We'd love to in any way we can. Thank you very much. I hope that this was helpful and that you guys will be able to successfully fill out your 941. Please continue to send in any questions as you guys find things. I've very much appreciated how much all of you guys have come together and helped out during this time. Certainly, I couldn't have done it if people hadn't asked the questions and hadn't, said, hey, this doesn't work for me because of, and we had to handle some kind of thing that is something that we hadn't looked at. Things like, you can say in our test system that we didn't have non-refundable, but really in real life, you guys out there, there's going to be a lot of you that run into that. And so please continue to, all your questions and comments, they are more than welcome. All right, have a good rest of the week, and hopefully all goes well. This recording will be sent out to all you guys shortly, probably this afternoon or early tomorrow morning. Thanks.